Hi, everybody, and welcome to Growth Hero. This is our first episode, and we are lucky to have the great and bright Jack Levinson. You go by Jack, right?
Yes, thank you for having me.
From Man Sales. And we're going to pick Jack's brain a little bit to hear a little bit about the amazing things that he's been doing for his clients and some philosophies that he has in being able to scale and grow businesses. Jack, why don't you give a little bit of an intro of what you've been doing till now and what you do?
Yeah, so we started Man Sales Co. almost a decade ago. We call ourselves a branding and persuasion company. Took us a while to get there, but we primarily focus on high-level creative projects where there's some sort of business challenge that needs to get solved creatively, both in terms of the actual business. Sometimes it's a business model, sometimes it's a product, and then strategy, visuals, messaging, all kind of connecting back to that. So over the years,
I was just going to stop you there. I love that you mentioned you find a business challenge, a problem that you're seeing how you could solve with creativity.
yeah,
So many people I find miss that point. They're disconnected from the problem, and they're more of like creating noise or attention. They're trying to be the it brand as opposed to seeing this a singular problem and that they have to get over using creativity.
yeah. To hop right into it, I mean, there's three three core components of successful messaging, which is impact, communication, and persuasion. Impact, you have to get their attention, otherwise, no one knows what you're saying. Communication is once you got their attention, you have to be able to clearly communicate what it is exactly that you do, so they know. And then lastly, persuasion. It needs to be persuasive, otherwise, everything is for naught. So a lot of times, like you can get their attention easily. That's not so hard. I always tell people just light an elephant on fire and you get everyone's attention, right? Doesn't help you.
Sure.
Um, but then when you get into the communication aspect, if you're going to talk clearly about something and there's just a problem there, then you have to solve that first, 100%.
And I love the persuasive part. Do you find that that's a big challenge to figure out how to persuade? I mean, there's so many books in psychology about persuasion. Do you find that creatives don't persuade enough?
So you asked if it's a challenge, not for us, because we're very good at it. I don't think it's as much as a challenge for other people as much as they just don't realize how important it is.
Right. It
Like there's
doesn't
all
even
this.
seem like it's on their radar at all.
Right. You have these debates, clever over clear and all that kind of stuff, but no one's talking about persuasive. Like clarity doesn't mean persuasive. Clever doesn't mean persuasive,
So
right?
how would you define persuasive?
I mean, persuasive is that you're strategically and intentionally writing or designing in a way that will encourage the people to specifically do what you want to do versus just getting their attention or just letting them know that this exists, and that's like it's so important. That's why we call ourselves a branding and persuasion company, because that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Moving the needle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like, that's what sales is all about. And there's a lot of it's tricky because there's no like when I try to break it down for people, I can be like, okay, well, a headline is typically the impact, right? Because the headline gets your attention or the hero visual, right? And then the body copy is the communication. And the persuasion is not so much a specific piece, but rather just a lot of little things that you're doing throughout. It could be just the insight, like the way you position yourself as being for these kind of people or offering this kind of service, and then that gets translated to the copy. It could be also little psychological tricks, like using um, um, I forget, I'm going blank. Like, I mean, technically speaking, just like the way you write your call to actions, or the way it's killing me. What's the word called? Like when you use social proof, right? A social proof isn't overused, but technically speaking, it's a persuasive element, and so on.
Yeah, trust builders, even the
Yeah,
pricing, how you sandwich the pricing, you're
exactly.
creating one of the UX, UI, even the archetypes that, what resonates with different people. I would think offers probably fit into there also, the right,
Yeah. Yeah, persuasive
yeah,
is
I
really
always,
that thing that runs through everything, like really runs through everything, and is most oftenly ignored, which is why most stuff don't work. You know?
yeah. So I love that. I love viewing it as like a funnel. So you have a funnel of people and they're stuck somewhere in that funnel. And our job is how to get them through that bottleneck. So get them closer to the sale. And then, as you're working with the client, you find more and more bottlenecks to figure out how to streamline that to get you to the end goal where you have your growth.
Right.
So,
If you like
that's a great
funnels,
example.
Yeah, if you like funnels, and technically it goes like impact is the top, then communication and persuasion. And if you think about it, like any company, the goal of a company in terms of the impact is to have as many people in the world know about it. Even if it's not relevant for them, you still want them to know about it, right? So that's why the impact is the widest. And then of the people that it's relevant to, that's the communication part. So you're starting to get narrow. And then of those people, a smaller percentage of them get persuaded to actually. So it's interesting. You can see, I guess, when you're working on a project with a client, they can be in various stages. Like I just started working on a project for a client that they have the impact, but they're just missing the communication and the persuasion part. So you have to kind of come in and fix that up.
So how do you do that? How do you approach that? For all the people listening at home, if they're in a similar, circumstance where they have attention, right? Everyone knows that they do whatever it is, the mortgages. How do you get them to the next level where, the communication of how they're different, how they're better, and then ultimately the last stage of persuasion, how do you get them to contact them or use them as opposed to someone else? How would you go about, figuring that out, or how would
Well, it's funny because I think that most people don't have that. Most people probably have an okay communication, but no impact and no persuasion. But if you do have impact and you're lacking on communication and persuasion, then what it typically means is that you have a nice advertising budget, or you're very active on social media, so everyone knows you exist, but you're not actually communicating anything of value, right? So, like, if you're a guy on LinkedIn, you're the mortgage guy, right? But the 17 mortgage guy. So, yeah, I know you exist because you annoyingly pop up in my feed every 10 minutes, but I still don't know why I should use you over anybody else. And that's communication, right? And persuasion. So, like, if you have, a lot of followers, or you're spending a large ad spend and you're not getting the results you want, then that's kind of, you have to start realizing, okay, people are looking at what I'm doing, but they're not connecting with it.
right? I say even if you're doing sales one on one, right? You don't necessarily need the impact budget, but you still do need to be able to be persuasive. You still need to be able to be communicative of why you, because like you said, 20 guys who are doing something similar.
All right.
So
I mean,
I found
budget,
people are a little bit lost when it comes to that.
yeah, budget's interesting because you don't technically need a budget. I mean, what you need is eyeballs, right? Again, it's that funnel, right? So if, let's say, there's 100 people that see you, for it's relevant for 40, and then you can convince 10 of them. So budget just makes more eyeballs faster, right? So, like, you start small, you call a guy, and then you call 10 people, one converts, and then they refer you to three friends, and one of those converts, and you go slowly, organically, you build up eyeballs, or you just put $1 million into it, and boom, the next day everyone sees you. But yeah, you're right. You still have the same communication and persuasion requirements, whether it's sales or advertising. And I think it's also interesting because we take a very sales approach to our marketing, like, hence, man sales co. Like, a lot of our marketing is written in a way of almost like if I was actually talking to you face to face, like, that's how I would talk, just in print.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like a direct sell, push them down to that persuasion. It's so interesting you bring that up. I was talking to someone today, and they said they were at a conference in Israel recently, and there was two schools of thought that were presented. One was jump into the market, spend a ton of money, and break in, and just know that your vision is correct. And the other one was do your market research, get your pitch perfectly, get everything perfect, and then go into it. Where do you stand on that argument?
I think it depends on your financial goals. Like, I get this question a lot, like, well, how much money should I put into this? Or, and like, because I always say, what's your budget? And they say, oh, I don't know. What do you tell me? I'm like, well, it depends what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you want, to have 15 locations and billions of dollars in sales, and dump $100 million in. If you have time, then, you can start slower. It kind of depends on how fast you want to go. If you want to go slow and steady, because, like I'm saying, like, the ability to go slow and steady or to jump right in also depends on, like, if you have investors, then you don't have to go slow and steady. You can make mistakes live instead of free thinking it out a million times. And if you don't have, if you have a tight budget, then you have to be smart about it. So it makes sense to kind of test things out and go slowly. I mean, we're a business, right? Business is ultimately about making money. So I say a lot of these things ultimately comes down to, like, that financial element to it, which I think also people oftentimes make the mistake. Like, people love to look at other companies, be like, oh, this company did that, this company did that. But everyone has different financial capabilities and also different financial goals. Some people like risk, some people don't like risk. So, like, someone who doesn't like risk, be copying a company that takes risk, and
Right.
vice versa.
And people always look at Coca-Cola and be like, they're doing that in their marketing. I'm like, Coca-Cola has distribution. They have all their stuff on the shelf. It's just a question of, are you buying Coke or Pepsi? There's no other option on the shelf.
Right.
They just have to persuade you to lean a little bit towards them. You, when you're not on the shelf, it's a totally different ballgame when it comes to your marketing.
I'll tell you something funny. I love when people bring up Coke and Pepsi because I find it so interesting. I learned about this during COVID, but most of their sales comes from licensing agreements. Like McDonald's only sells Coke. So there's tens of thousands of locations. I know the number. You walk in there, you can only get Coke. You go into the AMC theater, only Coke. Specific stadiums have licenses, right? With Coke, only Coke.
I never knew that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so like Burger King is Pepsi. I think Burger King's Pepsi. McDonald's
So
is.
Costco switching from Pepsi to Coke now.
So that's interesting. I didn't know that they had an agreement, but like these companies have agreements. So like, as much as people be like, "Oh, they're fighting over," it's like it's all predetermined. Like you don't have an option. You go into AMC and you can be a Pepsi guy all you want. You're not getting anything but Coke. And I think that's why it's interesting to me because Pepsi actually did a little bit better during COVID because I think their revenue share of licensing agreements was like 35%, whereas Coke was like in the high 40s. So when all those stores got shut down, they got hit much worse. Yes, I just found that analogy interesting. The distribution thing is also a very valid point that you brought up because like that's the worst thing. I have had that in the past where we had a client spend a lot of money in a brand on packaging, and then they just had no distribution. So like they were advertising and they were kind of like hoping like, oh, the stores will see the ads and then they'll be able to carry it, and like, yeah, it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, no. So I always say that people don't recognize how many pieces are there to the puzzle. They think it's just like linear and like, oh, it's just a matter of spending money and getting out there. There's so many real pieces, which is why, people like you coming in to be able to guide them through that process are so important. Let me ask you, when you find those quick wins, is there anything that you could, I'm sure you have a tool chest by now of like things to look out for that you find that right now in, today's, shifting market, the opportunities are? Where would you say the low hanging fruit is for most businesses out there to really look at, if they wanted to invest or wanted to do some growth, where should they put their focus? So if you're a business owner and you wanted to grow and you were looking for a win that maybe like most businesses in that space or most businesses haven't adopted it yet and there's opportunity. Where would you say the opportunity is now in the world? Like it was a time where, let's say, all Amazon businesses weren't branded. Now they became branded, right? So where's the trend going that you would say that, take a look at your business and see what the market looks like. There might be a real good win if you're in a market that doesn't have this and you could go provide that. Like where are you seeing for your own clients that you're getting wins for in terms of growth or where they're able to squeeze out a little bit more of their revenue and their profitability?
It's a good question, but I think it's very complicated because every industry is so unique. The thing that comes to mind that is probably the easiest across in most industries is email. Like if you have a solid email list and you have good, impactful, communicative and persuasive, campaigns and ideas, I think that's like a very low hanging fruit because there is no cost. I mean, you have your internal cost of creating the
Low
email.
cost.
Yeah, but I'm saying, yeah, there's a cost, but like a very low cost, and these customers are also looking for because they've already bought from you, and just like
I think that's such great advice because most people think that nobody opens email anymore. I
yeah,
get that all the time. Like email doesn't work,
right.
but like
They're just the bad emails.
when you show them how many people are making so much money from just the email channel. And today, email isn't just email, right? You could take that email list and layer it onto ads. You could layer it and teach Google based on these are your customers, and they could expound from there. There's a lot you could do with a good email list. I think it's a great tip that a lot of people overlook.
There's email campaigns, but then even like let's say you're selling an e-com, like there's a lot of I know just from like projects that I've worked in, but like a lot of times, let's say like a churn campaign, right, or an abandoned cart campaign. Like a lot of times you just set it and then you're done. Like it just runs. It could run for decades without you realizing. Like, oh, when was the last time we tweaked that? So I think that it's like you have someone abandons cart. You have an automatic email system set up. Check it every 6 months and tweak, fool around, A/B test. Up your messaging, see what you can do there. It's a little bit of a crutch, but the one additional good thing about email is that you do have you know strong data and you can see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah,
Cool.
no, that's it's definitely a nice win. You get a couple incremental lifts over there. Retention marketing, a lot of these tools like Klaviyo and these things make it really easy for people to start implementing that type of stuff.
Yeah. No, Klaviyo is great. We're on Klaviyo and MailChimp. I don't know for a couple different clients, but they're both great. And once you learn them, they're very easy to do.
Yeah, so that's definitely a great win. Anything else that comes to mind that you see a lot of your clients utilizing it, or even from the branding perspective, like when would you say that it makes sense for people to rebrand? I always find that question fascinating. Like, when is a good time to rebrand?
So that's actually, I have a very simple answer for that. I guess over 10 years, I've convinced people to do brands. Is like, if you think there's more potential to do better business from having a different look or a different sound, then it's time for you to rebrand. So like people say, oh, but I've had this name for 10 years. I've had this, whatever. True. And it's great. But if you think that you can get more by changing it, then you should change it. And if you don't, then you should not. And you can kind of take that across all degrees, depending on how, that could also dictate how drastic, right? Are you keeping your messaging and just changing your visuals? Are you keeping your name but just changing your messaging? There's a lot of different ways you could refresh, rebrand, update, there's different levels. That's really the
And
main.
people don't realize that they outgrow their brand sometimes, and what their brand is giving out to the world is no longer what they are, and they're just kind of like stuck with it. But if they take a moment to think about it and then realize that they've really pivoted, and their brand hasn't come along with them, there's a huge opportunity if they could get that communication of the right market. I say after 3 years in business, you should rebrand, because you now know what you are and you know what your strengths are, and you can double down on that and make it come alive so much stronger and get such a better ROI if you're able to really connect with who you really are, as opposed to what you thought you were when you started.
So there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that, and I do find it easier when companies are already like rebrand the company versus start from scratch because you do have that existing. But I think that when branding is done right in the first place, it should have been built in a way that allows them to modify themselves as they are. Because even a company that's 3, 5, 30 years in business, in 20 years, they're going to be different, right? So then what? So then they're going to update again and again. So, like, whenever you build a brand, you need to build it in a way that allows it to change as fast as the world changes, which is literally every minute the world is changing, right? So, like, you could have created an amazing brand for a company 10 years ago, but if it wasn't built to change, it would be completely irrelevant.
And
Companies
sometimes I
today.
think the logo or the style or just the messaging or different pieces of it, not everything has to be so drastic as changing the name and going full
Mhm.
force.
I think also that's what I'm saying. There I mean, most branding out there is just bad, it just is. Um, and I think that's also where strategy really plays such a big role, but I think the biggest mistake that people do in branding, marketing, advertising is they focus too much on the what, like what we offer, right? So we offer, I don't know, home delivery or whatever it is. But then when technology changes and now it's like, oh, you want to have like pick up and drop off locations on every corner because it's more economical or just makes sense, your whole company is irrelevant now. But if your brand is about getting things to you faster, so now you just have to change 2 words about, oh, we get it to you faster by doing this instead of drones or whatever it is. And I think like saying we're dropping big names like Coke and Pepsi, so let's just drop Nike, right? Like Nike's Just Do It. Can if in 100 years there's like some sort of like pill that you take and it makes a super strong skin on your feet that you can run barefoot, their brand will still be relevant. But if their brand was we make the best shoes, then yeah, it's not gonna last.
So I love you bring that up. A lot of times we have clients that say, I want my tagline or my name to express exactly what I do, as opposed to, being wide enough to future.
Right? Your tagline should be why you do it. Because also, if you think about it, companies don't exist in a vacuum, right? So if I hear, let's say I hear about a company, I hear about Brand Hero, right? So how did I hear about Brand Hero? Either I Googled marketing company or I asked a friend, hey, who do you use? And then your company comes up. So I already know what you do, right? So any company, I tell my friend, I'm looking for shoes, I'm looking for a drink, I'm looking for a party planner. They give me a name. I know the guy is a party planner already. So I don't need his name to be party planner or us. Right now, it should be okay. So now I'm looking at 4 different people and I'm deciding who I should use. The why is really really have an opportunity to start standing out.
Yes, I love that. It's like Simon Sinek's Why.
Yeah, I'm saying he used to be an advertising guy, and he took one of the tiny little concepts and then spun a whole movement out of it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
but he really brought it to people's forefront. I know that I saw you like to say that there's no difference between B2C and B2B marketing.
yeah,
Can you jump into that and explain a little bit your thoughts on that?
yeah. It goes back to like that mentality of like talking as if we talk one on one to people. When you're talking one on one to people, doesn't make a difference if it really doesn't matter. We we've done B2B, successful B2B. And I found that like you take a company, I don't know, let's just take a company, IBM as an example, or you want to sell to IBM. IBM is not the thing that is buying from you. It's some product manager sitting there that has the same issues that all people have, and they're going to decide. So, like the same way you would talk to them one way when you're selling them shoes, you could talk to them the same way about selling your software, as long as you understand how people work and how they operate. I find that to be a little disingenuous, even like the whole idea of like changing your tone of voice and that kind of stuff. I think that the reason why B2B is different in the world is not because it's been proven to work, but it's because it's just safe. It's much safer. And having worked within, corporate America framework, there's levels upon levels upon levels of management, right? So you need your manager to approve it, and then their manager has to approve it. So the further away the person is from the need that they actually need to solve, the more they just care about, all right, this is not going to blow up on me, so everyone's like, all right, we can't say anything this, we can't take any risks, we can't be funny, we can't be this, and it goes both ways. It goes both in terms of the companies creating the work, and 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 so they just get like, they just go what's safest.
So I
um,
call it the middle. When you have two partners, or you, like you said, the bosses, you end up with something that won't offend anybody. But at the same token, you're not really saying anything that's going to wow and really connect with people. So it's the safe route is the biggest enemy. I think is the biggest piece of advice that you could give anyone. And I love that you
yeah,
brought that up because
yeah,
so many people like safe is the enemy of marketing, I would say.
yeah, and I think I mean, because again, if you just go back to impact, communication, persuasion, you can't make any impact if you're safe. You can't really communicate because one of the key things about communication is really connecting with somebody. If like, oh well, we can't, we have to connect with this person, this person, this person, this person, and you just dilute it more and more and more. I forgot who said this, but like a great exercise, like you get like 6 people in a room and you say, all right, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, right? So you're gonna say, and I'm gonna say chocolate mint, right? Now, if we had to both agree on a flavor in order to get it, we would probably just end up with vanilla,
Right.
right? And you and I are
Mhm.
not going to get excited by vanilla, right? But when we're forced, we just go there. So like you create something that is essentially it's not acceptable to everyone. It's not acceptable to everyone,
Right. It's
and
not
nobody's
offensive
excited
to
with that.
anybody, but no one's excited. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's huge. We had a client once that spent a fortune on a branding and he brought it to us. And he's like, what do you think of that? I'm like, it says nothing. He's like, perfect. Because I'm a sales guy and I wanted to say nothing so that I could change my product based on who I talk to. And I'm like, so you're not a brand. Because a brand is meant to stand for something. And you only go for that 20 or 30% of the market, or like Pepsi, maybe 80% of the market. But there's a part of the market where you're saying, I don't want, and I'm just built for this.
right.
And people don't get that. People think like, I want to be like, especially Amazon sellers or salespeople, they're like, I don't want to turn away anybody. I want to be able to get the whole market. And realistically, if you have competition, it's not possible. So you
Right.
all fight over the big pie, or you could carve yourself out a niche that like really suits your company and own
Right.
something.
I
And that
think
only happens
statistically,
when you take that risk.
it's not even possible to own more than 30% of a market. Like I don't think there's any company in any industry that owns more than 30% of the market. I mean, they got very technical for a second. If you did, you would get broken down by the government as a monopoly. Amazon doesn't have 30, has maybe 30% of the market. If, they don't have more than that. Apple, like there's typically speaking, there's like two or three main players. And then you have like four or five secondary players that they'll usually come in and out, in and out. And then you just have like 40% is like independents, just like random. That's like typically the structure. And it's like, I was like looking at a study that was made like, I don't know, 80 years ago about retail. Like and that was like what they said then 80 years ago, and it's still relevant today. You know, like you think
Well,
Amazon, Target, Walmart, and then who's next? Just a bunch of like medium people. I'd say Best Buy and like I don't know whoever might pop in there, like, and then the rest is just thousands of random people.
it's like when you ever walk through like an aisle in a supermarket, and you know, say in the detergent aisle, there are 7 brands, but they're all owned by the same company. But they recognize that you can't get that market share by being one company. So they ended up
Right.
having to buy out all the competitors to have all and tied, and so that people have the variety and they have this one's cheaper and this one different market positions and positioning. Right? That's also like so important that people don't recognize that you have to have an edge. You have to have an edge case, and you have to
Right.
know what you are. And if you can't define what you are to the people, then people won't know what you are, and then you end up just being that price, which nobody wants to be.
Right. I mean, that's also a good strategy to be able to get in multiple markets, you know, by having a strong brand. But like, it's a tactic that you can really only do if you have a ton of capital, because like otherwise you're just splitting. Like if you're an Amazon guy and you want to try to do that, I would not recommend it because you're just going to spread yourself too thin. Like you can't.
Yeah, yeah. But that's really about distribution. The reason why it works is because the supermarkets have limited space, and a new player can't get into the shelves because the big boys pay for that space, and they know that they could get the whole aisle if they, P&G could go in there and say, I want the whole aisle. Don't
Right.
make any room for anyone else, and they'll stick to brands there. Even if they don't sell, it's worth it for them to stick the brand there, just so that the competitor can't get in.
Right. No, it's interesting.
And I think the licensing thing that you mentioned is huge. I've seen so many people do so well by taking their product, which is a commodity, layering on a license, and now being able to go
Yeah,
sell.
it's a tricky business. Meaning licensing is one of the is a hack, I guess, to get distribution. Because you go to Target and you say, "Oh, I make cameras." Okay, but you go to Target and you say, "Oh, I have the Kodak license. I make cameras." Then they'll take you. Because for them, it's
Right.
all about brand recognition.
Yeah, and the reverse is true also. If you look at like the TJ Maxx's Home Goods, they go the opposite way. They don't want a brand. They make you actually change your packaging periodically, so people don't get used to having one brand. That it should feel new every time a person comes in. They want to force you not to be recognizable, not to be a
Right.
brand. They want it to be like you found a new product.
Right. That's a persuasion technique. I like that right there. Like that's where I would identify that as. You know, like they've identified that their audience is looking for something new versus stability, and so then they create that. I like that.
Yeah. So we've heard some great ones today. Anything else that stands out for you like that? The main one in the branding space that's been hot is Liquid Death. I would love to hear your take on that, because that actually was a function that the marketing solved, plus the distribution, because people were able to charge so much more that it really blew up more than anyone ever believed it was possible. They're just selling water, really.
So they're not really selling water, right? They're selling a perception. Liquid death is interesting. I have a theory that I've been trying to like in my head it makes sense, but whenever I try to share it, people don't get it. And so I'm gonna try again. I'll try it here. But before that though, my one pet peeve that I have with so many businesses these days is that they're not making money. Like Liquid Death is still not a profitable company, and that's fine because they have a lot of money and investors, and they believe that long term they're gonna make money. I think Amazon.com still might not be making money. Amazon as a whole is making money now from AWS and their other projects, but
But that's persuasion. They figured out that investors will give them more money when they're pre-revenue than when they start showing revenue. Because when they start showing revenue, then they have to always show more
right, the
revenue.
potential is right. That's an element to it, but it's also more than that. It's also a strategy. Like a lot of these things are basically whoever holds their breath underwater longest stays alive, right? And then everyone
Who
they
can
kill
control
off the
more market
competition,
share?
right?
Yeah.
And they kill off the competition. Like look at Uber versus Lyft or all the other companies. Like you know, Uber has been able to hold its nose longer, and now Lyft is dying out, and then Uber is going to be the only one left. But the thing about Liquid Death, so here's the theory. The theory is that there's two branding does serves two purposes. Purpose number one is that brand allows you, the customer, to portray yourself to the world as a certain type of individual, right? So this brand stands for this. I show you that I'm using that brand. I'm saying I now stand for this, right? So Liquid Death
You're
is saying,
identifying.
right. And the other thing that brand does is that brand is a conversation between the company and the consumer saying that you can trust us, we're backing this, right? So essentially two
Yes.
different kind of things. One is serving this, giving you the ability to portray yourself a certain way, and one is giving you a certain sense of trust and reassurance. Now, the catch is that it doesn't work equally to every product. So I think there's a range. So let's say, for example, let's take Liquid Death as an example, right? Liquid Death, if you're buying Liquid Death over 25 cents a Poland Spring water bottle, you're buying it because you want to portray yourself as a certain kind of person, right? So therefore, Liquid Death doesn't have to give you a good price. In fact, they can charge you more because they're not charging you for the water anymore. The product here is simply just a medium for you to be able to convey who you are.
It
That's
actually
it.
works better if it's more expensive because it makes the people that drink it part of the club as opposed
That's
to
part of it.
a money conscious person.
Exactly. You're portraying I'm the kind of person that will spend $4 on water. And the product is almost irrelevant. Like the product has to just not taste bad and not have, fungus in it, and it's fine. Whereas a product being sold on trust, it needs to be a good product. And part of it being a good product is that the price is also right. I'm not going to trust you to sell me something if you're charging way more than market value. And I think that the way to know, so I think the mistake a lot of people do is that they brand for trust when they should be branding for perception, and they brand for perception when they should be branding as trust. So what I've identified, right? So I'm calling this Levinson's law. So what I've identified is the difference in how to go is in how visible you using the brand is. So let's just take Liquid as an example, right? Pretend this is Liquid Death. So I walk around for 5 hours a day. I'm on Zoom calls and I'm drinking kind of Liquid Death. Many people see me interacting with Liquid Death. So therefore, I'm able to use that as a tool for creating a perception of myself. Whereas the brand of socks that I wear, very few people have the opportunity to see that. So if the sock company was selling to me on a Liquid Death vibe, they would fail because they're branding themselves as this this way of portraying yourself a certain way, but no one's seeing that portrayal. So it's not worth it for me. I'm not going to pay $50 for socks just because that's a cool name if no one's going to know about that. And on the flip side, if you have, um, so I think what's very important is because there's a lot of practical nafkamina, so to speak. If you've
Well,
identified,
example would be is Walmart with Hermes. They started selling the knockoff Hermes bags for very cheap. So according to that theory, then it would have hurt them if it was a real brand, which it wasn't.
right? Well, yeah, that for sure. But I'm saying I think pricing and quality control, and really even your advertising strategy is really the main three things. So I'll walk you through it. Pricing, right? If you're a brand that has low visibility and therefore you have to brand on trust and quality, quality and trust is relative to price. If you're overcharging me, there's no trust there. But if you're selling on perception, then it doesn't matter. The more you charge, the higher the perception is, right? Same thing with product quality. If you're selling on trust, if it's a low visibility item and you're selling on trust and quality, then the product itself needs to be really, really good. In fact, I would argue that the quality of the product is almost more important than the brand because just by being a good quality, it becomes a brand that you can trust. Whereas,
But if it is, you could charge the margin there.
right, but not massive multiples, like within
Right.
reason.
So
And
within
at a
value.
certain point, it crosses over that line where for the price that I'm paying, it's no longer good quality. $100 quality material, paying 150, good. I'm paying $1,000 for 100, it's no longer good anymore. Whereas when you're selling a perception, the product is simply just a conduit for being able to perceive yourself. So it doesn't matter. A Louis Vuitton belt just has to hold my pants up. If it's made out of $150 worth of leather or $10 worth of leather, it doesn't matter. I'm buying it for the logo.
And that's the
Um,
licensing, right? Fossil has the Michael Kors license. They're making the same watch, sticking a Fossil, taking off the Fossil logo and putting on Michael Kors and charging an extra $100, right?
right.
Because it's visible.
And I think that's where take a company like Casper as an example versus Liquid Death. Both companies have spent a lot on branding. But I think Casper failed because Casper branded for perception when it's a low visibility item. Whereas
Right.
Liquid Death was a high visibility item. And it's also interesting when you start looking at the category, you see all these innovations that are happening like super quickly are happening in high visibility areas, I think I did a good job
Right.
explaining that, actually. All right.
That was very good. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
That's a,
We're gonna have to trademark that.
so that's a good thing for people to realize. Think about what industry you're in. And there's two things you can do about it. Either figure out what industry you're in and then market accordingly. Again, if you're in a high visibility, you're wasting your time talking about trust or quality. You're building up the brand, the perception.
But I like that because if the water people would have looked at themselves and recognized that it's a high visibility item, they could have made that shift. But everyone thought it wasn't high visibility. They didn't appreciate the value there. So there's a lot of opportunities if you could find a high visibility item in a category that doesn't take advantage of the fact that it's high visibility.
Exactly. And you can blow up very quickly. That's where you can blow up very quickly.
I love that. It's a great tactic.
I'm saying, look at Lakewood, like with Lakewood fashion, right? There's the way brands take off. It's like, someone wears a moose knuckle sweatshirt and it's super high visibility. Boom, the whole town's wearing it the next day. That's why fashion works very well like that. And the other interesting thing that you could do is you can take a product that is low visibility and figure out a way to make it high visibility. Like,
Give an example of that.
I'll just give you a very bad example just for argument's sake. But if you somehow convince people to wear their underwear on their head, it would now become a high visibility product, right?
A Louboutin shoe where they put the red soles was a good example of that. They took a shoe that
better example than underwear on the head.
Is that what type of shoe is that? Is that a black shoe? It could be any shoe brand, but the red bottom shoe was that signature print that allowed them to charge for it because now it became high visibility.
100%. 100%. And I think, like, if you look at the fashion brands that are most successful, they're usually the ones that are more and more visible. Like Louis Vuitton has a massive pattern everywhere, right? People love Ferragamo shoes, but they're only buying the Ferragamo shoes that have the logo on top, and they're not buying the other 95 shoes that they make. So it's interesting. There's a lot of
great. So you have two great tactics right there. Really, 2 points of
complex because it's way more. It's not as easy. Like, you have to put a lot of thought into it, and there's obviously also a lot of nuance there because not everything is so extreme. There's also, you have products that are somewhere in between, and you kind of have to start figuring out where the balance is.
No, but that's great. So there's some great tactics there. Really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to talk it out.
But before we wrap it up, anything else that you've seen trending right now in marketing that you think is the next wave? Like, where's AI going for you? Like, where do you see talking about robots, Elon Musk, like where do you see the next big wave of opportunity for in marketing, Brandon?
I think that low visibility items, going off what we just said, and most commodities are not going to need branding anymore. It's going to be completely irrelevant because I think that it's basically a process.
Well, we're already at that point because China streamlined manufacturing to the point where we're not worried about getting a dud made in China anymore. I remember growing up, we were scared of getting something made in China because it would break. But today, the quality is the same. Just slap the logo on and we all know it. So for a lot of items, we're okay with it being.
So I think it's going to go, that's definitely a component to it. But I think it's going to go even more because right now, let's say you sell shirts, right? Or you sell whatever you sell. You make a website geared towards me who wants to buy it to look at the website, and then I make a decision and I buy it. Now, what happens when I have the ability to ask my AI assistant, which is already in my phone in so many annoying places, right? There's one literally in every app you open up, and I say, I need a new shirt. This is my budget. Find me something good. And it crawls the sites, it finds, it says, all right, here's a picture, 1, 2, which ones do you want? And then it just buys it, right? So then your website no longer needs to talk to me, it needs to talk to an AI. So then what's gonna happen is that like websites are gonna like no longer even like I don't know what it's gonna look like because I know how AI will talk to AI.
I'll give you my theory on what websites will look like. But that's a great point. In other words, when you're using AIs to make purchase, they're brand agnostic. They're going to look at where it's made and what's it made out of, and just functionally decide.
So that's again, but that only applies to low visibility items, right? High visibility items. That's not just about quality and trust; it's about perception. I think those are going to become stronger and stronger because that's what people are going to start focusing on. So I think you're going to find more bigger ticket items having more brands invested in them and like people putting more effort in and even finding more ways to use products to identify themselves with because so much of it is being taken away.
So I believe on that note, and I think it's very related, I believe the websites will become AOV, which is average order value, and LTV, lifetime value focused. And what will happen is you'll create an Amazon for high visibility items, based on your style. So you'll have, let's say, the From guy who has Moose Knuckles and Aloe and all the brands that are high visibility sold in one place to one type of person. So that person could find trends of what people like him are buying, all personalization. So imagine Amazon if they took their data, which they have, and just personalized everything that's high visibility based on the type of person you are and gave you all the options and said, people like you are buying this to fit into their crowd. Do you want to buy it? I think is the future.
So I think I'm going a step further. I think that that still makes the assumption that websites will exist. Like I'm a big believer that in 10 years, the internet will essentially just be entertainment only. Because like,
Wow.
no, I'll explain to you why. Because my AI can do that for me. I can just ask
Well,
my AI knows me well. It will just recommend me things that I like. So I don't need to go to a website for it. Right.
right. So for discovery, I don't see yet how AI is going to do that.
So
But I
it's the
guess
same way. It has
theoretically,
access
it could
to
do
the
the
same.
same
I
idea.
have access to the same data. So I'll be like, I don't know, show me some cool things that you think I might like, and I'll show you the stuff. Like the same way you'll go to the website and do that. I think that so much of commerce is going to become conversationalist like that.
Well,
Localized,
social commerce
right?
with an
We're
AI
more,
algorithm.
we're more conversationalist, just like in the old days. You would walk in the store, I said, I need this, and the guy would be like, oh, what about this? What about this? And now it's just your own AI doing it for you. You know, and it's interesting. Like the way we adapt to technology is that when new technology comes out, we're limited to the framework of what we know exists right now. Right. So right now we know websites exist. So we're like, all right, so we'll have an AI on the website that will, sort
Right.
through
It's
things,
the famous Ford's famous example of that.
which is
If I asked people what they wanted at the time, they would say a
right.
stronger
I
horse.
think that's a deeper insight, more about people not knowing what they want, right? But yeah, can essentially, but I think the part of that is that only when the technology, because basically what we do is we take a new piece of technology and we attach it to our existing technology. And then
Right.
only when that new technology becomes widespread enough can we start to see the possibilities that come natively just from that tech. So like I realized this, so I try to like think 5 steps ahead.
A little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I
and
think
then
we're going to be walking down the street, see somebody wearing a moose knuckle coat. Our glasses AI will be able to register it, find it, and we'll purchase it right there, just based on what we see other people around us.
yeah, I'm fairly certain that tech probably exists already. But I think it's like going back to the whole why, just to kind of bring this full circle and impact and persuasion is one thing that never changes is human psychology. Right. I'm a big believer in evolutionary psychology, which is the study that essentially like the same core psychological needs that we had 5,000 years ago still manifesting today, just in different ways. So, like when you understand how people think, then you may not know where the technology will go, but you know what people's needs will still be. So, like few steps ahead, I had this thought like 3 years ago. That was funny. Before AI came out, I was really based on like rendering, but the idea that in some point in the future, you'll be able to tell your computer what movie you want to see and it'll make it for you on the spot, or even music. But when you think about it, when you break down and you understand the psychology, one of the best parts about watching a movie is not the hour and a half that you watched it, but the ability for the next 10 years to be able to make references and jokes to your friends about it. And if everyone's just watching their own individual custom movies, you won't have that. So what I think will happen is that let's say something like YouTube Shorts or TikTok, that stupid
Right.
stuff that will all
And
be
and
AI
and then all
generated.
spread.
But there'll still be the need for major movies and movie stars and songs that are on a global level that we can use them to connect with each other with.
Right. 100%. I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs still exists, right? So you have the food, shelter, have, and then the connection, right? Connection is ultimately people are selling to people, and connection is the base human desire. Introvert, extrovert, they still need to connect, and ultimately, if you could tap into that and making people feel like they belong, right? That's high value sales is really based about that, right? How do I make people feel like they connect to something bigger than themselves? We
Mhm.
all are here to we want to birth something into this world that's bigger than us,
Right,
and we want to be part of something bigger. And I think that's the way that human nature was
right,
created.
right. That's branding 101, right? It's giving you, I mean, from the perception standpoint, but it's giving you this tribe. I guess evolutionary psychology would say that we have this tribal instinct, because strength in numbers and that kind of stuff, right? So we have this need to be part of a large group, and it's why like when you meet somebody for the first time, the first thing you do is you play Jewish geography. You try to find that connection. Your cousin went to the same camp I did. Okay, now I feel safe talking to you. Good, like now I know we're connected somehow. Or where like people who smoke will always feel comfortable going to another smoke and asking for a cigarette because like, oh, we're both in the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really wrapped into our DNA. So really, I thank you for coming on. This is great.
Yeah,
Great
thank you.
insights here. I'm gonna have to sleep on some of those theories that you came out with. Good stuff there. And I think there's huge opportunity if you follow that train of thought to find those gaps where, because I think the market is really wide open in those areas. You could really bring something to market, and that's a great tip. And we spoke about a bunch of different really good tactics and ideas. So how would people get a hold of you if they want to ask you questions or follow up? What's your preferred method of communication?
Mansales.co, leave a message, and I get them all.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. And that
Thank
was
you.
really wonderful.
It's an
Great stuff.
honor to be your first guest.